and if they expect me to walk away from Luton with nothing, I'll make very sure there's nothing to walk away from.
Hello and welcome to the Oak Road Hatter podcast as we creep closer to the start of this unbelievably exciting season at Kenworth Road. 5 signings, a few departures and a hell of a lot of people writing Luton Town off. It's going to be exciting and we can assure you that there's plenty more of that to come. I'm Billy Mully, joined today by Jamie Castle and Kieran Robertson. Fellas, how are you getting on?
Very good. As the title of this week's pod suggests, the summer is becoming marvellous. So it's starting to ramp up now. Getting really excited. Two working weeks until Bochum, then one more, and then it's Brighton away. Premier League football for Luton Town. Can't wait. Every week that passes, I get more excited. It's nice to now on the pod to have a lot more to talk about. Well, I think during the summer we were starting to sort of scrape together ideas just to try and get content out for the Luton fans. But now there's actually some juicy stuff to talk about. So yeah, all is good.
We could do this podcast every 2 days. That's how much has been going on in the Luton Town space. I wonder if it would have been similar if we were still a Championship club, or the glitz and glamour of the Premier League just brings out this need of doing more and creating more content. We'll never know because we are prepared for the Premier League. Kieran, how are you?
Not too bad. Back at work. So it's all systems go in the work life. It's all systems go Luton Town wise. 11 working days for me in a row. And then I'm literally leaving work Thursday night to go straight to Jamie's and fly straight to Eindhoven on the Friday. So super exciting. But like I said, all systems go, just work all the way through. We're almost there. Summer is heating up, summer is there. And it's weird that as good as the Bochum trip's going to be, at some point it will sink in that, by God, we're a week away from the season starting, which is absolutely mental and incredible all in one. So excitement is a strong 11 out of 10.
Yeah, for me, it's when will we first see the Luton kit with the Premier League patch on? Like, is it going to be on the Friendlies, Bochum away? I think that's when it's going to be like, yeah, we're here. If Luton wear the new home kit in Bochum with that little Premier League lion on the right sleeve, is it? I think that's when it will start to be like, yeah, we're here.
The moment it will hit for me is the second you hear the Premier League theme tune ringing out round the Amex on the 12th. When you hear that tune that you've been just so used to just hearing on FIFA and hearing in other games, and then all of a sudden you're stood there in real life like, oh, that's my team under there. Oh, right, cool. That's the moment, I think. Like the kit plus the theme tune that we'll hear 38 times. I don't think it won't not be a good feeling, you know?
Yeah, goosebumps.
And us three have mentioned it already. It hasn't, the feeling of being a Premier League club hasn't sunken in yet. And progressing through this summer, it still doesn't feel that little bit closer. And we're sort of trying to speak there about when we're actually going to feel ready for this Premier League season. I don't know if anybody, and this is probably something we should put to a poll, does anybody actually feel Premier League ready as if we're about to go into a Premier League season? It just doesn't.
It's weird. Like I do feel as if it has sunk in. I do recognise with Premier League, and I've come to terms with that fact. But it's then when you just sort of see in articles, yeah, Luton Town have paid £5 million for Chong, and you just have a little chuckle to yourself as if like, is that even real? And you see an article saying Messi is not helping a transfer from Martinez to Luton. It's just like, am I asleep or something? Like, so I think in general, like 95% of my waking hours, like it's like it is sunk in. But then you just have this odd news line or this odd tweet that you could come out and you just have a little giggle to yourself. Yeah.
The bit for me at work today was I have a couple of clients who support EFL clubs, and we were chatting. They were like, "Oh yeah, like what's your sort of predictions like Championship all the way down to League Two?" And I was a bit like, "Do you know what? I have not even given it a second of thought." And that sort of those conversations help it sink in a little bit, because like when you're in the EFL, you care about the whole EFL, right? Like when we're in the Championship, it's like, yeah, cool. We're always keeping tabs on League One because we want to see who comes up, and we're always keeping tabs on League Two because why not, right? And it's always one of those things where I was like, actually, for once, it's not top of my thoughts, and that feels strange. Like top of my thoughts is again actually starting to care about Premier League football, whereas usually, especially the last couple of years, I've not really been that asked. And it's not the first time I've said that on this pod either. Whereas now I'm very much like, anything Premier League, my eyes are on it. Anything EFL, I'm a bit like, I'll catch up with you when the season starts, but until then, I'm not that bothered.
I'm the same with the Premier League. I haven't given the Premier League much thought, as probably evidenced by my fantasy football from the last couple of years. I
You and
haven't.
me both.
I didn't realise how good Matoma was until the other week, and apparently he's been doing it for a
6.5
while.
million. What?
To be fair,
Yeah,
I had that about
yeah.
João Polina as well at Fulham. I think he was in the at least top 10 or 15 in midfielders last season. And I was thinking, all I know about the bloke is that he's a defensive midfielder. I was like, but apart from that, you could tell me he scored 20 goals and I probably wouldn't have known. Like, fine.
But of course, this is stuff that we'll all come to know over the next few weeks. That is for sure. On today's show, we're going to go through the latest news. We're going to look at the latest transfer stories. We're also going to take a delve into the free polls of the week, some that are based on news stories, some based on transfer stories. And we'll get started with the kit. The home shirt came out looking very, very nice. It got, I'd say, sort of mixed reviews, but I think the majority of people that liked it really liked it. And you'd probably say it was somewhere around the 75-25 mark with people who liked it and people who didn't like it. In my eyes, really like it. The orange going into the white, the utilita. I know Stephen Day, who everyone knows from this pod, is not an advocate for it. But for me, utilita, it works very, very well. I like the way it's spaced out. I like how bold it is. I'm not too into my kits. I'm not someone that really studies kits like that. But I know Jamie Castle and Kieran Robertson, you two, you do like your football kits. So I'll open the floor to you two.
Yeah, I think overall I love it. I think well, the first 2 or 3 times I looked at it, I was like, yeah, nice, not overly sure, but yeah, I like it. I think it hit better, or it landed better than last season's kit. I think last season's kit was a grower. I think towards the end I really liked it. I'm guessing performances helped that, but I think at the start very unsure. Whereas this year it was very, like, yeah, I like it. Far from perfect. I mean, I think the sponsor's great. I would drop the Life of Power strap line, but other than that, I think it's a good sponsor. Yeah, I think initial instincts, solid 7 out of 10. Not amazing, but good. I think just a 7 out of 10 for a kit is decent. I would take that every season. But now I'm looking forward to seeing what the away and third kit is like, because I think we could do something special with that. Although I was actually thinking about all the teams that we could wear the away kit against, and actually there's quite a few red teams in or red or similar teams in the Premier League, so it seems like that we might wear it a few times. But no, overall, yeah, I think it's a good 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I think my consensus is fairly similar. Like I looked at it and at first glance I was like, yeah, I like it. The consensus on Twitter seemed very like meh, it's all right, rather than oh my god, it's amazing or that's disgusting. It was just very in the middle, like anything between a 5 and a 6 out of 10, probably. In fairness, a couple of the criticisms I saw was obviously you look at sort of the navy stripe, it only goes down one side, not sort of this closest side. I would have added that second one in, obviously because they released what they tried to make it look like, sort of that old 70s kit with the white and navy stripes. We had a very similar kit in non-league, and that hit really well. I had the collar, same design, Carbrini. Oh geez, remember the Carbrini? But what a kit that was. So they kind of went for that. I would have respected it a bit more. They've done the same this year as what they did last year. That the only criticism I actually had of the home kit last year was if you looked at sort of like the ends of the sleeves, they just had this really big block on the ends rather than them being a little bit tighter. Maybe I'm just saying that for us muscle fit gym lads, I don't know. But it was just a bit baggy and it felt a bit like, I don't want to use a word evasive. I don't know if that's even really the right word to describe it. Either way, it just felt like it was hanging down my arm rather than sitting up here. And with a football shirt, I quite like wearing them to the gym. So I quite like them similar to my shirt now, like at the top of my arm, not hanging down towards my elbows. But all in all, I'm more, again, like looking forward more to the away and third. I like the fact that we always seem to have a bespoke trio, always have since we've had Umbro. So long may that continue. We never really get shafted with templates. You look at AFC Wimbledon, they had a really, really strong trio this year. Umbro have been pulling it out the bag for pretty much every club they've been working with. Cambridge United, again, another really good trio. Boston United, Carlisle, they both, again, got a couple of nice, like, retro-y kind of vibe with their kits. Hoping we get similar with at least one of the two. Like, I'm not expecting all three to be these, like, retro remakes. Give me a retro away and then maybe a bespoke third. Sound as.
See, I think for me, all it's missing is an actual collar, like a proper collar, not the way that it seems like they've tried to give it like the collar look without actually without putting the little flaps on. I think if it had a collar, I think it'd be definitely a solid 8 or 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I feel like it's like it gives people a bit of a nostalgia trip having the collar on it. People are like, oh yeah, like it looks. I don't know if it makes it look more premium.
I think
maybe,
it does,
but like
yeah,
you think of even like Man United's home kit from last season where they had the collar and immediately like the consensus around that was, oh my god, like it's an amazing shirt. And to be fair, it was, like, not to sugarcoat it, it was a really good kit probably for that reason. And it complemented it really well. So hopefully on an away or third we get a cheeky little collar. It looks good on 5-a-side then.
I think the Burnley kit has like that Umbro diamond going around the trim, doesn't it? I think that looks quite smart.
Yes. Yeah, it does. I quite like that actually. Either way, like I said, on either the away or third, do something, Umbro. Pull it out of the bag. I trust you. Always have for the last few years. So just make it count.
There you go. I promised you that Kieran and Jamie would steer the conversation past my initial. Yeah, it was nice. That's all I can say.
Little poll in the comments. Has Billy ever been to Classic Football Shirts? Yes or no?
I think that poll would speak for itself. Let's go on to something that I can contribute with, and that is Marvelous Nakamba joining on a permanent deal. When he arrived on loan, it was considered a big coup. He almost instantly made an impact. The kind of impact he made, you could compare it to where Dewsbury Hall came in. I guess completely different in terms of the roles, but in terms of what he done for the club and the performances he put in and the consistency of his performances, you could draw comparisons and similarities to even Carter Vickers when he came in on loan. So getting him on a permanent contract when there was a little bit of doubt whether we'd be able to afford and go up to what his wage demands would have been has to be seen as a big coup, Jamie Castle.
Massive. I think you're spot on in terms of his presence last season, sort of as good, if not better, than Dewsbury Hall when he came in. I think he was that final piece in the jigsaw when he came in last season. We were just missing that again, you come back to it loads, that Alan McCormack style of player, who's someone who just breaks it up and just is able just to grab a game by the scruff of its neck and just turn it on its head. Sometimes when you're under Lacoste, which we will be loads next season, by the way, we'll be under Lacoste an awful amount of time next season. Just to have that player who can really just try and break the game up and just give our centre halves and our keeper just a breather for a second or two. So to get him this season again on a permanent, on a 3-year deal, by the way, as well, is fantastic. It speaks, I think, one of the quotes from Edwards was, it speaks volumes about the club's ambition. And also, I think strategy. I think there was probably every chance that they could have got him in earlier, which if the preference would have been to have got him in 2 or 3 weeks ago before Slovenia, absolutely no doubt. But just having that bit of patience, not paying over the odds, and that they, as far as we're aware, they've not paid 5, 6, 7 million for him. They've paid sort of what they deem to be acceptable for someone of his ability. They were just patient with it, and ultimately we'll get him in 2 or 3 weeks later than like the overall preference of the board and the management team impact our season. No, so it works for us obviously financially because we wouldn't have done it, and in terms of on the pitch, a massive piece in that jigsaw. Probably need one more to back him up behind him, because I think if Nakamba was to get injured, then I think we might be in trouble. So it would be great if we can get potentially a younger one that we can develop, or someone like I think we were linked with Travis and Pearson, someone who maybe is just a player who's happy just to sort of be in the squad and be there for rotation. But yeah, overall, we're definitely a 10 out of 10 transfer.
And Kieran, let's talk midfield options here now. Jamie sort of alluded to his preference is to perhaps bring in another one for that kind of rotation factor. Looking at our current midfield options, is there anything to you that stands out as something we're missing? Of course, we added creativity in Chong. We've still got players that are behind that current line of the 3 midfielders. Someone like a Louis Watson, Alan Campbell, that haven't really seen the minutes under Edwards, but are still players you consider on the fringes of things. Do you think we could see another midfield addition? And if there was another midfield addition, would it be that Nakamba role to support him? Or would you see somebody coming in more of a number 8?
I sort of alluded to it a couple of pods ago, and when we sort of spoke about the Nakamba and Pearson rumours. And I think my thing is like having the idea of the best of both worlds in a defensive midfielder, as in it's evident we need a second one. I think if you were to pick out any position in that midfield 3, DM stands out as the glaring omission in terms of squad depth anyway. Like Nakamba starts without a doubt, hence why I brought him in. But it's that sort of, if like you said, if he's injured, you look around and you go, all right, but who comes in? And quite honestly, I couldn't tell you because I wouldn't know. Which is the problem. If we can answer that question, then that's where you need that sort of second option. I like the idea of having something that's a bit different to Nakamba. You don't want 2 Nakambas. I mean, I'm sure everyone would love 11 in one team, like 11 eating ropers, but ultimately you want something that if the game is a bit different or it's going a different way, like I alluded to that Ben Pearson rumour a couple of weeks ago, you want the best of both worlds, because Nakamba's not going to be suited to every game. Equally, whoever option number 2 may be, whether it is a Lewis Travis or anyone else, isn't going to be suited to every game either. So it's about having either option. If one gets injured, you've got the other one that's just as competent. You've then also got that other option for, Nakamba's not quite up to scratch for this type of game that we're in, or if we need 2 at once, option 2.
Yeah, it's definitely in that number 6 role. I think if Nakamba was to get injured, you've got 3 options. You drop someone like a Pelly or a Campbell back in there who's not a single pivot. They're definitely more sort of a double pivot or an 8 type of midfielder. Or you play someone like an Osho who probably is versatile enough to sit in there, but definitely hasn't had the game time at a good level to play there. So to throw him in the Premier League is just a massive risk, a risk that could pay off. I think Osho definitely long term could play there, but I think to do it in a Premier League game from the off is tough. Or you trust a Louis Watson, who again he showed brilliant glimpses last year in the Championship. So I think he definitely is capable again long term. But then if you're relying on Louis Watson for 15, 20 games because Nakamba's out, then I think that's a massive risk. So if we can bring in someone a bit younger, maybe, or a bit different, like Kieran said, that would be great for the squad.
Let's talk Issa Kaboré. Great name, great potential. Somebody Man City rate very highly. They've handed a new contract to him before sending him out on loan to Kenilworth Road. What were your initial thoughts when Kabore's name was mentioned? Because obviously we had Cody Drammer last season, whose strengths were in his tackling and I guess in his ball progression as well. Kabore, we don't know too much about him, but looking at the stats, he looks somebody that's going to get forwards, but also has good defensive resilience. He's by all accounts, looking at the statistics, he's a good tackler. Do you think Kabore is going to, play lots of football for us? Do you think he's going to be number one in terms of our right wing back? Do you think there's potential to add to our right wing back options? What do you think with Kabore? What do you think that means for the rest of the squad?
Yeah, initial instinct was excellent. I think our track record with loans in recent history is good, very good. Like you said, last year Nakamba, Drama, obviously Horvath did a job. Dewsbury before that, Carter Vickers before that. So I think generally our loan signings have been really good, and we definitely use our loan slots for players that we can't afford to get on a permanent or players better than what we can feasibly pay for. So that in itself is exciting. Comes from the City group, which they've produced a lot of young stars. I mean, if you look at the players that they've sold on for big 15, 20 million pound fees, I think is it Carlos Borges going to West Ham linked for 14 million quid from that same academy group. So, I mean, I guess in terms of that group of players, great pedigree on loan at Marseille last year. I think the 29 appearances is a bit misleading because it was only 9 starts I think in the league. So okay, he did get decent minutes, but not amazing. But still, for what the third best side in Liga last year in Marseille. So again, if you told me that someone's progression path was to go from Marseille to Luton, then you'd think bloody hell. So yeah, from that side of things, fantastic. Spoke to the more knowledgeable amongst us, who obviously hasn't appeared much recently, but still very much involved. Dylan, I spoke to him about the way he views things. Said he's far from perfect, but Luton can't get perfect. That's not where we're at. I think athletically fantastic. Again, you look at YouTube compilations, he looks absolute lightning in terms of the way he can carry the ball and dribble it up the pitch, which we're going to need loads in transition next season. Especially obviously he can't be used at the Etihad, but somewhere like that, just to have a player that can transition and just get us up the pitch is going to be massive. Final ball might be lacking a little bit, but you back the coaching staff to get it into him over the course of the season. I guess the only gutting thing is that he's not ours, so there's a good chance we can develop him into a very, very good Premier League right back, and then next season he's Man City's new Kyle Walker, which obviously would be a shame. But I guess the benefits of that is that it develops a relationship with a very strong academy that could hopefully trust us with their players going forwards. So yeah, that's the only one, I guess, blot on the loan signing for me is the fact he's not our player. But we definitely couldn't have afforded someone as good as him on a permanent. So why not use one of our 2 loan slots for someone like him for sure?
That's a good point you make at the end of that. The fact that, of course, he's not our own player. Affording him would have been a massive, massive stumbling block. But if he is to perform well with us and there's no immediate pathway into Man City, then there has to be potential that we'd be high up on his list of places to go. But then on the flip side of things, you look at the Cody Drammer situation and that didn't quite work out the way we would have liked. Of course, a completely different story with Leeds getting relegated to the Championship and sort of missing Luton by us going up. But you'd like to think if he can develop relationships within the squad, if he can, prove to be a supplier for Elijah and Colton Morris, and if he's able to complement somebody like Reece Burke or Gabe Osho, whoever plays in that right-sided centre-back slot very well, then you never know. There's lots of examples within even last season where players have performed well for a loan club. They probably the club that they've been at probably in no real position to purchase them, but this summer they've already got them. So yeah, I think that's got to be our hope if he can perform well. Obviously, if he performs well in the Premier League, there's going to be a lot of eyes on him, and that might make it a little bit more difficult. But we can only position ourselves strongly.
And I think as well, we just link it back to the point I would use for Nakamba on the patience of the sort of our transfer strategy. I think, if we're being honest, again, it's a guess. Was Kabore our first choice for that right wing back slot? Maybe not. I think you have to assume Drama was certainly up there, if not first choice. But fundamentally, if Leeds are asking for stupid money, we're not going to pay it. We're not going to pay £8-9 million for Drama because we don't believe that he's worth that. So we said no, thank you. We'll go for Kabore on a loan instead. And I think that just, for me, obviously that is a massive assumption, but I think it could be quite a fair one, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. So it just proves that we've got a strategy and we're not going to deviate from that, which again sort of is fantastic for us long term.
And as we've mentioned throughout, there's a lot of potential incomings. There's a lot of incomings that have actually already happened. 5 new signings coming in at Kenilworth Road. But one departure we will talk about is Carlos Mendes Gomez. He has signed a 3-year deal, I think it was, at Bolton Wanderers. First reported at the weekend by Alan Nixon that Bolton was set to submit a £300,000 bid for the 24-year-old. It's all progressed, and Luton confirmed at 5 o'clock this evening that he is heading back up to the northwest. In my eyes, a really good talent that, I guess, stylistically speaking, from when we went to 5 at the back and started to really centralise our attacks and had less of a focus on wingers, that became an environment that didn't suit him. There was no bad feeling at all. I think you can just tell by the way that the players interacted with him. He's a much loved member of the squad. He's somebody that has high potential. He's somebody that Luton really liked having as well. But if he is to progress, I think he needs to go. He has gone, but I think he needed to go to a club that suits his style. And I think he can find that at Bolton. A really good progressive manager in Ian Everett. They play a good brand of attacking football. In my eyes, I think he's going to shine there. I don't think it'll be too long before we see him in the Championship, if that's with Bolton or not. But he was always that one in that group of players on the fringes that I believed was of the highest quality, the player that was closest to being involved in our squad. It's just a shame that we didn't really suit him from a formational perspective, but he goes on with our best wishes. And like when he was at Fleetwood on loan, we just all want to see him do well, and it's another example of that, really. We'll go on to the 2 fixtures that we've got coming up, 2 friendlies that will be in front of fans. We've had 2 friendlies behind closed doors so far, one against Peterborough, one against Ashdod, Israeli side. But now we've got Ipswich Town coming up at Colchester United, which is tomorrow. Of course, by the time this episode comes out, we'll know everything we need to know. We'll know who started, we'll know the score, we'll know every little fine detail about that game. But we've also got Sheffield Wednesday to look forward to. 2 teams that were promoted. Ipswich, in my eyes, are going to do quite well in the Championship. They had a Championship ready squad already last season, and I think that's going to be a very good test to see where we're at. Just looking at those 2 games, and I know we don't like drawing conclusions or drawing any real predictions about pre-season, but what are these games to you both? You expecting to see us absolutely blitz these teams now with Premier League, or are you more level-headed and wanting to see good minutes for players we haven't seen in Luton shirts yet, and just sort of see those relationships start to form? Someone like Tahith Chong, seeing him settled in the Luton shirt before the Premier League campaign will do quite nicely, wouldn't it?
I think it's one of those now where we've had the closed door friendlies and they're a bit more experimental, but like the closer you get to the regular season actually starting, you see a pattern more in pre-season games, and you actually see, here's a rough idea of what my best 11 looks like, essentially. That's what you're going to start to see, whether it's tomorrow or against Sheffield Weds, or even sort of next week when we're playing Wolves and playing Bochum more so. I mean, by that point, whatever that starting 11 is for that first game, more than the second game, is going to be here is probably what your starting 11 is going to look like on Brighton away, or what Rob Edwards views at the moment as his best 11 with what he's got currently available. Obviously, it's still going to be a bit of experiments here and there, trying and testing a few things, because if you're going to get it wrong at any point, this is the moment to get it wrong, and play a bit more guesswork, perhaps. But like I said, the closer we get to Brighton, the closer we're going to get to sort of having a better understanding, essentially, of what our best 11 looks like.
Yeah, I think it's just as well trying to develop that familiarity as well in the squad. I mean, hopefully we can get a keeper at least pre-Wolves, and hopefully we can get whoever that first choice keeper is to get a bit of, I guess, rapport with that back three. Anderson as well, if he can get some good minutes alongside Locks and Bell or Washer or wherever Edwards sees him fitting in that back three, just to get that, for that sort of just to become a bit more familiar with I guess the systems play, the system that we play. I think it's even more important for the new signings. Chong, like, okay, I think there's no doubting his ability going forwards. Obviously, it's still good to get that familiarity with Morris and Eli in front, but at the same time, defensively, whether we can fit into that shape and do the defensive side of the game that Edwards wants him to do. So I think it's more important for the new signings pre-season in terms of getting into that system and sort of that Luton style of play. Ipswich and Sheffield Wednesday, as you said, are going to be two good tests to sort of start it all off before it ramps up with Wolves, and then Bochum away, which will be intense, 2 lots of 90 minutes. So it's going to be intriguing to see the way that Edwards plays that.
We're going to head into a swift break. When we're back, we will go through the latest transfer news and we'll go through the week's polls. We are back for part 2 of the latest episode of the Oak Road Hatter podcast. And of course, like last week, we are straight in with the latest transfer news. Unlike last week, we have only 2, but they're quite interesting. There's £7 million valuations in both of them. We still chuckle. We do chuckle to ourselves when we speak about multiple players being valued at 7 figures, and these are players that potentially could be coming to Luton. And we say potentially, we've already had a couple, well, 3 now, that probably enter that 7-figure region. So yeah, just another reason to be excited about being a Premier League club. We'll go first with Ryan Giles. It's looking very, very close. The latest update from Daily Mail's Tom Columbus. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but that's how I've pronounced it.
Sorry, Tom.
Sorry, Tom, if you're listening. I don't think he would, but you can be hopeful. So Ryan Giles, Luton are looking Luton beaten, according to him, Middlesbrough in the pursuit of the left wing back. Of course, at Wolves at the moment, not really part of their plans. He hasn't travelled out to their pre-season training camp. So that's looking close. The valuation there is 4 to 5 million. We've spoken about Giles. We've spoken about the kind of service he provides. We've also spoken about, the similarities and differences we can draw to Alfie Doughty. So I won't bore the listeners and watchers with that again. But £5 million as a valuation, as a potential price point that Luton will pay. What do you think of that? And of course, we've got to factor in the fact he's 23, still a year or 2 on his current deal at Wolves. Is he too similar to Alfie Doughty? That's probably a question that we haven't spoken fully about. And I guess the last question to throw loads of questions at you and what you try and remember everything I said. Could that lead to Alfie Doughty potentially playing right wing back when we play Man City, or if Kabore needs a few games to get up to speed with things? Does Giles come in at left wing back? And the flexibility of it all, does Rob Edwards start thinking about maybe a 5-2-3 or a different kind of variation that could get both Giles and Doughty on the left side of the pitch?
I guess take it in turn, right? Valuation, I think, yeah, excellent. In fact, was it Alex Cook of Talksport said it could be sort of 4 million up front and then rising to sort of 6.5, which, if that's the case, absolute snip to get one of last season's best players in the Championship. For that price is excellent. Great age, homegrown in terms of English, I believe. I think, yeah, he's English. So yeah, I mean, overall, great transfer. It allows us to be flexible. There's going to be systems where we're going to definitely play both on the left at the same time, because we're going to need to double up. Like you said, it will allow Doughty to play on the right. It would be satisfactory to go into the season with Kabore, Doughty, and Giles as the three actual wing back options. I would love, and I think it's less important compared to like a goalkeeper, let's say. But I would like, just so I can sleep at night, just another right wing back option. Just we've got someone there that can cover Kabore, because I just think City at home and away, when Kabore can't play because he's ineligible against the parent club, I do not want to potentially lose Giles or Doughty to injury, which then could leave us a bit up shit creek. So it would be great to get one more. But yeah, it definitely, in terms of back to Giles, it gives us that flexibility. Doughty can play on the right, inverted. Giles or Doughty can play left wing with the other one at left wing back or left full back. So that's fantastic. And what was the second question in between that? I think there was another one that I missed. Anyway, yeah, I think overall, yeah, I'm a big fan of the signing, and to get him in to upset some of the Borough fans is just a little cherry on top as well. So
Yeah, that was. Oh, go on,
what
Bill.
about Onyedinma? You mentioned there you won't be able to sleep at night, but Onyedinma, he was trusted a lot under Edwards. Obviously, he wasn't first choice, but he often came on as one of our first subs, and it was even in games where we're under Kosh a little bit. He came on and showed real defensive resilience, something that he's not typically known for. But I think he's grown more and more comfortable as a 1v1 defender. Of course, his pace is brilliant, but he's also patient in the tackle and defensive duels. He's actually quite impressive for. So, do you think Onyedinma was somebody that could step up to Premier League level? I sort of mentioned there he's improved defensively, but does he meet the standard requirements at the top flight?
I think that's a fair challenge. I guess if you look back to Bramall Lane away, he played there and was definitely good, and he definitely was part of a great team performance. I think, can he step up? I think the only thing for me is consistency. I think in the odd game he'll put in a fantastic performance, but then I just, again, seeing him against a Jack Grealish or a Phil Foden or whoever he might come up against, I don't know. I think it's tough mentally to get away from the fact that he's a winger turned wing back, a bit like Ogbene, right? I think there's no doubting that he can do a job at right wing back, but fundamentally he's a winger playing at right wing back. He's not an out and out fullback or wing back option. Whereas Doughty and Giles have had so many minutes at wing back at good levels. They've had consistency in performances over the course of 1 or 2 seasons. So if we can just get someone else in, especially permanently, right? Like even if it's someone that is probably a year off being ready in the Premier League and will be back up to Kabore, and we can sort of bring him into the squads. So then when Kabore goes back to City next summer, we've got that person there behind him. Yeah, again, I think we will be fine over the course of the season with Fred and Ogbene there as right wing back. But I guess it's just trying to think of perfection, right? And I think perfection would be just to get one extra option in there.
Yeah, I think realistically, Onyedinma's one of those that I think stepping up to the Prem, I'm not convinced of it. He didn't get very minutes in the Championship, albeit I think that's a Mendes Gomez kind of conundrum where we weren't playing out and out wingers. So hypothetically, it's quite difficult to fit him in. A couple of times he was almost thrown up front as just a last 10 minutes, you're a bit of pace, do a job. Or even in the playoff final, he was called out at right wing back, if I'm not wrong. Would I see him being upgraded as a top priority at the moment? Maybe, but not quite. Get to January on the other hand, and you're probably looking at that thinking, again, another 4 months of him not getting minutes. I did see one small link a little while ago of him to QPR, but saw it the once, never saw it again. So evidently wasn't much in it. But a move to a high-end Championship team, I don't think's off the cards. It might have been discussed behind the scenes, but if it were to happen, I wouldn't be surprised. And I think to sort of follow on with what Jamie is saying, I think the option would ideally be either an older, experienced wing-back who's happy being a rotational option with Kabore, or a younger player who, again, isn't quite ready yet. Give him a year, he'll be fine. I was gutted to see Ola Aina. He was a free agent this summer. I think he was recently, is it Sassuolo he was just at, but obviously former Chelsea youth player. I couldn't remember who he was linked with or going to, but I saw his name stick out and I thought, oh, fuck me. Wouldn't have minded getting him in. He'd have been a really good option, but then I also think the Ryan Giles move kind of maybe stopped any notion of that. So,
yeah, I think that QPR link was just me playing matchmaker too, Kevin. I think I was just trying to think of potential links. But no, I think, for example, that link to QPR makes complete sense. Played under Ainsworth at Wickham. And if QPR can get him for a high six-figure fee, sort of in like the 800,000 type of range, I think that's a sign for QPR that they should absolutely make. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Fred go in the summer. To be honest, I think he's a player that, again, that I think we're probably growing faster than him. That's not to say that he can't ever reach that level, but I think ultimately it's a cutthroat business, football. So I think if we got a decent bid from a good Championship club and it was guaranteed first team football for Fred in the Championship, I wouldn't be at all upset with that. I think, again, it would be similar to Carlos. He would go with my best wishes for his future career. So yeah, I think, again, it might be one for later in the window. See what happens. See if teams start to bid some money for him that we can actually use to reinvest in an actual right wing back option.
And one name I didn't think I would be speaking about on today's pod is Keinan Davis. I wrote the plan out for everything a little bit earlier, and Keinan Davis's name cropped up after I'd put everything together. When I first saw his name linked with Luton Town, I was excited, and not necessarily because I think he'd be a very good player at Luton Town. It wasn't that reason. The reason was I couldn't wait to see Twitter's reaction, and of course, Twitter didn't disappoint in what form. It was brilliant, and I think that's why we eventually turned it into a poll. It was very interesting to see the sort of final numbers, but just going through the news story itself, the Athletic, I think it's Watford's reporter Adam Leventhal, I think his name is, or Leventhal. Again, sorry for butchering journalist.
Not
names.
sorry, Adam, because you're Watford, so not sorry.
But anyway, he has revealed his interest in Keinan Davis, of course, at Aston Villa, spent last season on loan at Watford. He has mentioned that Luton and not other championship, but there are championship clubs involved in the pursuit of the Aston Villa striker. He said a package of between 4 to 7 million could be enough to lure Villa to selling him. 25-year-old striker, absolute powerhouse of a forward. I'll come to you first, Kieran. What were your initial thoughts when you saw Keinan Davis's name, and did you enjoy Twitter?
The second question, you already know my answer just by my reaction when you started talking. It's the whole Ashley Young conversation all over again, isn't it? if you take your Watford tinted glasses off for 5 seconds and eliminate the possibility of, oh my God, he used to play for Watford, therefore he must be a bad footballer. We'll stop there and we'll ignore those people and we'll come back to the people that talk about his ability as a footballer. Did his season at Watford pan out as expected? No, that's a fact. However, you have to only look at the season before that. And the reason that Watford then brought him in was because of how bloody good he was at Nottingham Forest in getting them promoted, right? He was influential up top. I'm not going to pretend to spout out facts of how many goals and assists he got, but he was one of the names that was always talked about in their team. We come up against Forest in that season, and we were always thinking, that big bastard Davis, like, what a player every time. He's just always a nuisance, just elbows here, heads there, wins everything, bullies people. But that's the sort of striker that you come up against and think, what a big bastard. But if he played for me, I would be loving it. And yeah, did he live up to his ability last season? No. But then, without trying to sound very biased, name a Watford player that's lived up to their expectation in the last 3 seasons. And even their fans would say, actually, not very many. I'd take him. We sort of had a conversation about Ogbene, and I know one of you two asked me if I wanted another striker, and I said yes, but I wanted it to fit the mould of something that we already had that offered that little bit more different. He screams Adebayo, but more direct. And that says a lot because Eli loves to get the ball at his feet and he loves to take a man on. But Davis is just that sort of next dimension to that. He's still only 25. And the key point, I've essentially rambled for a little bit, but the key point I'm trying to drive home is just because a player has one bad season at the age of 24, because he's now 25, has one bad season, does not mean he is a bad player. And also to add on to the fact of, oh, he played for Watford, so he must be bad. That's not a reason to say, oh, he wouldn't be any good for us. Like, some players just don't suit clubs, don't suit systems, don't suit managers. But Keenan's that sort of player that we've said before previously, and I know people have said this previously, I'd love to have him. I'd hate playing against him. Okay, so then put him up top in our team where he's actually going to give him good service, good chances, play regularly, and tell me that you wouldn't have that in your team. That's my opinion. And if anyone wants to use the Watford card against me, they can. But I'll just say the same thing. Remember when we took Matty Spring back after he went to Watford at the end of the day? Like, you can use the Watford card all you like, but Rob Edwards too. Like, it's not an excuse to call a player bad just because they've played for a rival team. Like, it is what it is.
And I think one key thing I remember about Keenan Davis is I'm totally with you there, Kieran. I think he's a fantastic player. I think what he offers suits the way we play. I think if you add the kind of player he is to the potential of getting someone like Ryan Giles and, you know, the creativity Doughty brings, creativity that probably Chong brings now from a central position, I would absolutely love him at Kenilworth Road. And, you know, of course, there's Luton fans that remember his shithousery, but add that to Kenilworth Road and we'll absolutely love him. It's the kind of Danny Hilton scenario as well, where you absolutely love him on your team and hate him when he's not on your team. And Davis as well, adding a further point to this, he is the only player that I've seen physically dominate Reece Burke. Reece Burke, I think, as a 1v1 defender is absolutely fantastic. And I don't think there wasn't many better in the championship. And, you know, that could be evidenced by what the job he did on Victor Gyökeres in the playoff final. But Keenan Davis had his number when we played against Nottingham Forest in that 1-0 victory. Davis was fantastic. The ability to drive, the ability to hold a player off, his link-up play. I think there's a lot of qualities that suggest he would fit in very well at Luton Town. And, you know, a lot of people, as Kieran alluded to, will immediately turn their nose up because of his Watford connections and the fact he's a bit of a shithouse and gave us Luton fans a few gestures or whatever he'd done. But
what was the outcome of the poll?
We'll go through that now. I'll just load that up. the outcome of that poll, which asked, would Luton fans be up for signing him? There was 41% at yes and 59% at no, and that was with 244 votes.
That's fair enough. Yeah,
Is that what
I think, to be fair, if I was to guess, I thought more would say no because of the Watford link. So I think that's a good thing that ultimately almost half of people have sort of tried to look past the Watford thing. I think Kieran's spot on with what you said, but obviously Bill's backed up as well. I think for me, I guess the one thing is if you just try and extract recency bias, and Kieran, you mentioned it in terms of just because he's had one average season doesn't make him an average player. Like fundamentally, to take away the last 12 months of recency bias, if you offered me this time last season, Carlton Morris for £1.5 million or Keenan Davis on a season-long loan from Aston Villa, I would have gone Davis all day long. In terms of, I think the expectation last season was Morris was obviously hadn't quite done it in the Championship. He'd got 7, 8, 9 goals, and he was okay, average to good at best. Came in and was absolutely exceptional. There's no getting away from that. Carlton Morris was exceptional for us last year. But Keenan Davis for Forest was good. I think in terms of stats given, you mentioned goals. I think he only got 5 for Forest, but it's not that. Like, it's not just about that. It's he would make the team work so well. It's like we've mentioned for Eli on the last pod, the way that Eli's helped Carlton Morris get the goals that he's got. What's to say Eli can't do that for Davis as well? You look at Ryan Giles, who we're looking to bring in, but with Akpom last season got 11 assists. So what's to say Ryan Giles can't do that with Keenan Davis for Luton next season in the Prem? So it all just makes sense. And again, getting away from the Watford thing, getting away from an average 12 months. Fundamentally, if I was offered him last season on a loan, I would have absolutely taken him. And then we would all be clamouring him. We would all be clamouring for us to get him on a permanent this summer. So overall, I think 7 million probably is a bit too much. I think it was Adam Leventhal said between 4 and 7. I think if it's at the upper end, probably overpaying. I think market values is around 5 or 6. So if we can get him for 4 or 5, then I think let's absolutely do it. You sort of think what's the odd 1 or 2 million, but to us it's quite a bit. But no, overall, if finances work, if wages work, definitely get him in. And then again, ultimately, if we do go down, he's going to be a top Championship striker who probably, regardless of next season, if he comes down with us and plays in the Championship, will be top 5 Golden Boot odds for next season in the Championship, and there will be a reason behind that.
I think he's one of those where we sort of obviously mentioned it with Mendes Gomez, where we sort of essentially a casualty in our own progression, like more than good enough if we were a league below. And I think Keenan Davis fits into that category, but for Villa, I think if they weren't doing as well, if they didn't have as much money, if they hadn't just got a European finish last year, and if they didn't already have Ollie Watkins, Cameron Archer potentially coming through as their number 2 now, you look at that and Davis would be higher in the pecking order, I think. Especially, say, if Villa finished 12th, would you look at Ollie Watkins and think that he'd go further up the league? Probably, whereas they haven't. And he's shown a lot more quality this year. So then now Keenan Davis slips down. And I think it's just a sign of what we're sort of looking at recruitment-wise as well. Like, again, Nakamba's been a sort of subject to that at Villa again. And I think that transfer hopefully has built a good relationship with Villa, firstly. Secondly, shows what sort of players we're looking at is like where Mendes Gomez was a casualty of our progression. Are we shopping around other Premier League clubs looking at thinking, right, he was first or second choice, now he's third or fourth, but for us, he's more than good enough to be number 1. And I think Keenan Davis, again, like I said, fits into that category, and I think for us, has a better opportunity for progression than if he were to stay at Villa. Or personally, I think if he was to drop down a league, I think he's done that now. He's been there, done that. He did it with Forest. I think in that season showed he's more than capable to step up to the Prem. Obviously didn't show that at Watford, and a lot of critics could easily say, fine, he needs another season at that level to prove himself. But I think there's no better way. In a sense, it gets to a certain point in a player's career where you go, the only way to prove yourself in that league is to prove yourself in that league rather than sit in a level below, come up, join us in that league and give it a good crack. And you're either good enough or you're not at the end of the day.
It's funny because if Davis was scoring 15, 20 goals in the championship that we all aspired to be, then he would be worth 15, 20 million quid. There's a reason why Middlesbrough were asking for 15 million for Akpom, right? And 12 months ago, you're thinking Akpom. Now he's hot property. It's just funny how it's funny how much a year makes.
And you think Akpom's 27, right? And at the start of the season last year, he didn't have a squad number. Middlesbrough didn't think anything of him. And I'm going to be brutally honest and say that not very many clubs thought anything of him, because his career so far hasn't been the best. However, fair play to him for proving people wrong who have always been a bit like, yeah, Akpom's this, Akpom's that. He's bounced back and proved like he's bloomed later, like a Jamie Vardy, not quite to the same extent of obviously winning the Premier League title, but it just shows you can't write a player off. Again, like I said, after one or two bad seasons, like players can have phases of their career where they are not as prolific, not as good. And that's just down to the setup that they're involved in. Whereas Akpom now has found, like he credited Carrick a lot last year and sort of said, look, I found a manager that actually believes in me, plays me where I want to be played. And as a result, I'm thriving. And who knows if signing a player like Keenan Davis, he might have had a crap season last year, quite simply because he was low on confidence, because he wasn't given the confidence in that setup to thrive, changing managers week in, week out. Now, he could be put in a setup where it's like, we expect A of you because we know you're capable of it. Go and prove it. And he goes and does that.
Yeah, the best clubs operate effectively by looking past the narrative, looking through the headline numbers and actually thinking as an underlying player, is he good enough? Borough did that last year with Akpom. They looked past the narrative of him being this lazy, sort of overrated, sort of Arsenal youth product footballer who hadn't really quite done it many places. And now they believed in him, they had the faith, and he's done what probably he was always capable of, and he scored a lot of goals. Same with Carlton Morris. It was different in terms of, I don't think anyone thought it was lazy or overrated. I just think he just hadn't really been played to the best of his ability in the right system, and we did that for him, and he scored 20 goals. So yeah, I think the best clubs operate effectively by looking past the narrative, and that's what we've done before, and that's what we'll do again and keep on doing in the future.
And we'll go on and we'll fire through these ones. The other two polls. The first one is, who is the biggest Luton Town Fantasy Premier League bargain? And we had as the three options Amari Bell at 4 million, we had Issa Kaboré at 4 million, and we had Elijah Adebayo at 5 million. One sentence answers here. We'll go Jamie first. Where would you be, or would you be another?
I flipped and flopped loads. Very briefly, at first I thought Morris at 5.5 was brilliant, but I think in reality, when you look through the fixture cycles, you're probably not going to play him too much if you play it seriously, which I'm going to. So I think I'm going to save the 0.5 million and go Eli, I think.
Kieran, what about you?
Me on the other hand, sorry Jamie to disagree with you, I'm going to go Issa Kaboré. 4 million, no brainer, especially in the world of FPL. You hear all the time people saying, oh yeah, go for those 4 million defenders that are actually going to play. Well, funnily enough, FPL went, here you go, here's a player that's probably going to play at least 65% of games. He's probably going to be on the end of a few assists, hopefully a few clean sheets. 4 million, can't go wrong. Issa Kaboré, you're in, son. Welcome to my FPL team.
And make that too, because that's where I would have gone as well. Just reading the results of that poll, Amari Bell was at 27%. Issa Kaboré was the overwhelming winner at 52%. Elijah was 16%. And other was at 5%. And we had a couple of comments that said Morris at 5.5 million. Third and final poll, who is attempting 38 out of 38 Premier League games next season? I know somebody that is. He's got his hand up. That's Mr. Jamie Castle. Kieran Robertson, what about you?
I am on 37 out of 38 at the moment, purely because for once, I'm actually hoping that Sky Sports move a fixture. I know, shock horror, that I actually want Sky Sports to come and save me for once. But my missus' birthday currently falls on the same day as Tottenham at home, which is annoying, but also not a lot I can do about it. And if it was Tottenham away, I'd be a bit more upset. Tottenham at home, we're fine. But equally, I'm also like, Sky Sports, do something for me, please. Friday night, Sunday daytime, don't care. Just not Saturday.
Mate,
Please.
if that was Spurs away, you were absolutely missing Georgia's birthday. Sorry, Georgia, but if that was Spurs away, there is no way you're missing Spurs away.
Do you know what? I don't think there's a sorry Georgia about it, because even she was like, good job it's Tottenham at home, because if it was Tottenham away, I wouldn't be seeing you. And she actually said, in fairness, she was like, I wouldn't stop you either. And I was a bit like, it's a bit different when it's your birthday. Like, I kind of lose the right to say anything. If it was my own, I'd do what I fucking want. But on her birthday, I kind of, as your dad once said to me, Jamie, and he'll tell you many a time, I'm sure, in the future, some days, my friend, you just have to concede. And that is one of those that, sadly, as it stands, I have conceded, and 37 out of 38 is currently my goal.
Well, I know Dad watches this, so I can't wait for the WhatsApp message from him just to say, oh yeah, well, Kieran's right. Yeah.
Cheers, Steve. Love you, Steve.
Well, yeah, I was actually quite surprised with the verdicts of the poll. We had 29% at yes, which I think is a fantastic effort. 29%, nice. 38 out of 38. That is commitment. Even with us being in the Premier League, that will be fantastic. And we had 71% at no. Well, that just about brings us to the end of today's episode. Big push at the moment for our YouTube channel. Asking everybody to subscribe, because we are building. Kieran's building some great content on there as well for the shorts. Have to shout him out, because he usually shouts out Oak Road Hatter. Have to return the favour for everything he is doing at the moment. But until next week, it is goodbye from us.